Get out of here now. This isn't for people like you. Catherine Blackwell's voice echoed through the concrete underground garage like a siren. Her $5,000 Chanel coat billowed as she strode toward the modest Honda Civic parked in spot number 1, the most coveted space in Meridian Financial Tower. Zara Washington stepped out of her car, briefcase in hand, and found herself face to face with a wall of designer-clad executives. Their morning coffee steamed in the cold garage air as they stared at the black woman who had dared to park in executive territory. "Ma'am, that spot is reserved for our company's highest-level leadership," Catherine continued, her manicured finger pointing like a weapon. "You need to move to visitor parking immediately." The security guard's radio crackled to life. Phone cameras emerged from expensive purses and jacket pockets. These real-life stories of discrimination happen in corporate America every morning, but this black story had a twist that would shatter everything. Have you ever been so completely underestimated that revealing the truth could destroy someone's entire career in 5 minutes? Catherine Blackwell positioned herself between Zara and the executive elevator like a bouncer at an exclusive club. Her Hermes Birkin bag swung from her shoulder as she gestured dramatically to the gathering crowd of suited executives. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly why we need better security protocols," Catherine announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Anyone can apparently access our private garage now." Zara stood perfectly still beside her Honda Civic, briefcase at her side, watching the performance unfold. The parking spot beneath her feet bore a small bronze plaque. "Reserved. Executive Level 1. The highest designation in the building's hierarchy." "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification," said Marcus Rivera, the building's security chief, approaching with 2 uniformed guards flanking him. His tone was respectful but firm, clearly influenced by Catherine's obvious authority and expensive appearance. "Of course," Zara replied quietly, reaching into her blazer's inner pocket. Her movement was deliberate, unhurried, as if she had all the time in the world. But Catherine stepped closer, close enough that Zara could smell her perfume, something French and aggressively expensive. "Before you show him whatever fake ID you've prepared," Catherine said, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a confidential tone, "let me explain something. This building houses Meridian Financial Group, one of the most prestigious financial institutions in the country. We don't have people like you in executive positions." The words hung in the air like smoke. Several executives shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke up. A young associate pulled out her phone and began recording, her TikTok feed automatically going live to her 5,000 followers. "People like me?" Zara's voice remained steady, but something flickered in her dark eyes. "You know what I mean," Catherine replied, her confidence growing with the audience. "This is a serious business environment. We can't have staff arriving early and parking in spaces meant for actual decision-makers." Dr. James Park, a senior vice president Zara recognized from the business journals, stepped forward. "Catherine, perhaps we should—" "James, please," Catherine cut him off with a wave of her hand. "I'm handling this appropriately. Security is clearly a building-wide issue if unauthorized personnel can access our executive level." She turned back to Zara, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Sweetie, I'm sure you're a lovely person, but executive parking is for people who actually run companies. Not for people in your situation." Zara's phone buzzed against her hip. She glanced down briefly. The screen showed incoming calls from Sarah Kim, CFO, Marcus Torres, General Counsel, and Board Emergency Line. She let them all go to voicemail. Instead, she opened her notes app and began typing. Every word Catherine spoke, every gesture, every witness. Her legal training from Harvard had taught her that documentation was everything, but her business experience had taught her that timing was even more important. Around them, the garage was filling with more executives arriving for the emergency meeting. Most stopped to watch the confrontation, their expensive shoes clicking against the polished concrete as they positioned themselves for better views. Catherine was playing to her audience now, her voice carrying across the underground space. "I've been with Blackwell and Associates for 15 years, she announced. "We handle legal affairs for most of the companies in this building. I know who belongs here and who doesn't." She gestured toward Zara's modest Honda Civic. "If you were actually supposed to be here, don't you think you'd arrive in something more appropriate? A Tesla at minimum? A BMW? Something that reflects actual success?" The TikTok live stream viewer count had jumped to 12,000. Comments flooded the screen faster than anyone could read them, but the tone was clear. This was becoming a viral moment in real time. "Ma'am," Security Chief Rivera interjected, clearly wanting to resolve the situation before it escalated further. "If you could just show us your parking authorization." "She doesn't have authorization," Catherine interrupted. "Look at her, Marcus. Does she look like she belongs in executive parking? Does she look like someone who makes seven-figure decisions?" The question hit the garage like a physical blow. Even the executives who had been trying to stay neutral flinched at the naked prejudice in Catherine's voice. But 3 other lawyers from Blackwell and Associates stepped forward to stand behind Catherine, silent supporters whose body language screamed agreement with every word she'd spoken. Zara noticed Dr. Park pulling out his own phone, not to record, but to text someone urgently. She caught a glimpse of his screen. "Emergency situation in garage. Catherine Blackwell is—" "You know what?" Catherine's voice rose an octave, frustration creeping in as Zara remained calm and silent. "I'm calling the police. This is trespassing. Pure and simple." She pulled out her iPhone 15 Pro and began dialing, her fingers moving across the screen with theatrical precision. "Yes, I need officers at Meridian Financial Tower. Underground Executive Garage. We have an unauthorized person who refuses to leave the premises and may be casing vehicles for theft." The words "theft" and "police" sent a ripple through the crowd. Several executives began backing away, sensing that this was spiraling beyond professional embarrassment into something that could damage careers by association. But Catherine wasn't finished. "Yes, she's approximately 5'7", black female, probably early 30s, dressed like, well, not like someone who belongs here. She's been evasive about providing identification and is clearly trying to gain unauthorized access to our secure areas." Zara's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "Zara, this is going viral. 25K viewers now. Legal standing by for your signal. Sarah." She looked up to find a dozen phone cameras pointed at her, the garage's LED lighting creating perfect conditions for high-definition recording. Every major social media platform was about to have this footage within minutes. Catherine finished her call and turned back to Zara with a triumphant smile. "The police will be here shortly. I suggest you move your vehicle and leave the premises before they arrive. This could get very unpleasant for you if you continue to resist." Security Chief Rivera looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, if you do have authorization to be here, now would be a good time to—" "She doesn't," Catherine snapped. "Trust me, Marcus. I know everyone who's supposed to be in this building, everyone who matters anyway." The elevator chimed. 2 police officers emerged, Officer Patricia Chen and Officer David Martinez, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else than mediating a corporate parking dispute at 6:50 a.m. "Someone called about a trespassing situation?" Officer Chen asked, her tired eyes scanning the crowd of expensively dressed executives. Catherine rushed forward, her heels clicking against the concrete. "Yes, officers. This woman has illegally parked in our executive garage and refuses to provide proper identification. She's clearly not authorized to be here, and I'm concerned about security for our vehicles and employees." Officer Martinez looked at Zara, then at the crowd of executives in designer suits, then back at Zara in her simple navy blazer. His expression suggested he'd seen this script before. "Ma'am," he said to Zara, "can I see your driver's license and any parking authorization you might have?" Zara nodded calmly and reached into her briefcase. But this time, as her fingers brushed against her identification, she felt the smooth plastic of something else. something Catherine and the others hadn't seen yet. Her executive elevator keycard, the one that would only work for the building's top 3 officers. But timing was everything, and she wasn't quite ready to reveal that card. Not yet. She handed Officer Martinez her driver's license, a document that would soon make several people in this garage very, very uncomfortable. "Here's my identification, officer. As for parking authorization," she paused, letting the tension build. "I think there may be some confusion about my role here." Catherine laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "There's no confusion. You're trespassing, and now you're about to be arrested for it." The clock was ticking. The board meeting would start with or without its participants. And Zara Washington, the woman Catherine Blackwell had just publicly humiliated, threatened, and attempted to have arrested, was the one who had called that meeting in the first place, to announce the biggest acquisition in Meridian Financial Group's history, an acquisition that had been finalized at exactly 12:01 a.m., an acquisition that made her Catherine's ultimate boss. But Catherine didn't know that yet. Officer Martinez examined Zara's driver's license under the garage's harsh LED lighting. His eyebrows rose slightly as he read the address, a prestigious neighborhood where most of the city's financial elite lived. "Zara Washington," he read aloud. "This address is in Beacon Hill." Catherine's confident smirk faltered for just a moment. Beacon Hill wasn't where housekeepers or administrative assistants typically lived, but she recovered quickly, doubling down on her assumptions. "Address means nothing these days," she said dismissively. "Anyone can rent a room or claim residency. The real question is whether she has legitimate business in our executive garage." Dr. Park stepped closer to Officer Martinez, lowering his voice. "Officer, perhaps we should verify her parking authorization before this goes any further. I'm sensing there might be more to this situation than—" "James, please stay out of this," Catherine snapped. "You're too nice for your own good. That's exactly how these situations escalate." She turned to address the growing crowd of executives, many still recording on their phones. The TikTok live stream had exploded to over 40,000 viewers, with comments flooding in from around the world. "This is a perfect example of why we need stronger security measures," Catherine announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to corporate presentations. "Unauthorized personnel accessing secure areas, attempting to intimidate legitimate employees, possibly conducting surveillance for criminal purposes." Zara remained perfectly still throughout Catherine's monologue, but something had shifted in her expression. The earlier patience was hardening into something more focused, more dangerous. "Catherine," Dr. Park tried again, "I really think you should—" "What I think," Catherine interrupted, her voice rising, "is that we're wasting valuable time on an obvious situation. Officers, please escort this woman from the premises so the rest of us can attend our important business meeting." Officer Chen had been quietly observing the dynamics of the crowd. As a 15-year veteran of the force, she'd developed an instinct for situations that weren't what they appeared to be. "Ma'am," she said to Zara, "do you have any documentation that would explain your presence in this parking garage?" Zara reached into her briefcase again, this time pulling out a leather portfolio. As she opened it, Catherine stepped closer, clearly intending to intercept whatever document Zara was about to produce. "Let me see that," Catherine demanded, reaching for the portfolio. "I can verify whether any documentation is legitimate or forged." But as Catherine's fingers grasped the leather edge, Zara's grip tightened. For the first time since stepping out of her Honda Civic, Zara's voice carried an edge of steel. "Please don't touch my personal property." The words were quiet, but they cut through the garage's ambient noise like a blade. Every conversation stopped. Every phone camera focused on the 2 women locked in a tug-of-war over a simple leather portfolio. "I'm trying to help resolve this situation," Catherine said, her voice strained as she maintained her grip. "As the senior legal representative for most companies in this building, I have the authority to—" "You have no authority over me." Zara's response was so quiet that people leaned forward to hear it. But the words carried a weight that made Catherine involuntarily release her grip on the portfolio. Excuse me? Catherine's voice cracked slightly. I said you have no authority over me. Zara's eyes met Catherine's directly for the first time. None whatsoever. The crowd sensed the shift immediately. The confident executive who had been orchestrating Zara's humiliation suddenly looked uncertain. Her perfect composure began showing hairline cracks. I have been practicing law in this building for 15 years, Catherine stammered. I know the protocols. I know the procedures. I know who belongs here. Zara finished the sentence. Is that what you were going to say? The question hung in the air like smoke. Catherine's mouth opened and closed without sound, as if she was suddenly unsure what words were safe to speak. Around them, the garage had filled with nearly 30 executives, all transfixed by the confrontation. The social media explosion had attracted attention from local news outlets. Several verified journalists were now commenting on the live streams, and hashtag Meridian Garage was trending regionally. Dr. Park, who had been trying to de-escalate the situation, finally stepped directly between the two women. Catherine, I think we should let the officers handle this professionally. And ma'am, he turned to Zara, if you have documentation that clarifies your authorization to be here, this would be an excellent time to share it. Zara nodded slowly and opened her portfolio. Inside were several documents, but she selected one specific paper, official letterhead visible even from a distance. But before she could hand it to Officer Martinez, Catherine made a desperate grab for it. That's obviously forged, she declared, lunging forward. No legitimate executive would arrive in a Honda Civic. Look at her clothes. Look at her car. Look at what? The voice came from behind the crowd. Everyone turned to see Elena Rodriguez, Meridian Financial Group's chief operations officer, emerging from the executive elevator. Her presence immediately changed the atmosphere. This was someone whose authority was unquestioned in the building. Elena! Catherine's relief was audible. Thank goodness you're here. This woman is trespassing in our garage and attempting to use forged documents to— Catherine! Elena's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Stop talking. Right now. The command hit Catherine like a physical blow. Her mouth snapped shut, but confusion replaced relief on her face. Elena walked directly to Zara, her expression unreadable. The two women exchanged a look that lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but it communicated volumes to anyone paying attention. Ma'am, Elena said formally, I apologize for this delay. The board is waiting for you upstairs. The words detonated like a bomb in the confined space. Catherine's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. Board? Dr. Park whispered. Elena, what board? The emergency board meeting that was called for 7 a.m., Elena replied, her eyes never leaving Zara's face. To discuss this morning's acquisition announcement. Officer Chen looked between Elena and Zara, professional instincts kicking in. Ma'am, can you clarify this person's authorization to be in this garage? Elena reached into her jacket and pulled out her own executive key card, identical to the one Zara hadn't yet revealed. This woman has the highest level of authorization possible in this building, Elena said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the garage. Higher than mine. Higher than anyone else currently present. Catherine's legs seemed to wobble. She grabbed onto Dr. Park's arm for support, her face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. That's impossible, she whispered. Is it? Elena's smile was razor sharp. Catherine, in your 15 years of practicing law in this building, have you ever actually researched who owns it? The question landed like a sledgehammer. Catherine's grip on Dr. Park's arm tightened as the implications began to sink in. Meridian Financial Group owns this building, Catherine said weakly. Everyone knows that. Yes, Elena agreed. And who do you think runs Meridian Financial Group? The silence that followed was deafening. 40,000 people watching the live stream held their breath. 30 executives in designer suits stood frozen like statues. Two police officers waited for an explanation that would make sense of the chaos they'd walked into. And Catherine Blackwell, the woman who had spent the last 15 minutes publicly humiliating, threatening, and attempting to have arrested the person standing in front of her, finally understood that she had just destroyed her own career with surgical precision. Because the woman she'd been trying to have removed from executive parking wasn't just authorized to be there. She owned the entire building. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Catherine's breathing was audible in the concrete garage, quick and shallow, like someone drowning in plain sight. Her designer coat suddenly looked less like armor and more like a costume she could no longer afford to wear. Elena Rodriguez stood perfectly still, letting the weight of her words settle over the crowd like falling snow. The question she'd posed, who runs Meridian Financial Group, hung in the air, demanding an answer that everyone present was suddenly afraid to give. I don't understand, Catherine whispered, though her voice suggested she was beginning to understand all too well. Zara finally moved, reaching into her briefcase with the same deliberate calm she'd maintained throughout the entire confrontation. But this time, instead of documents or identification, she withdrew a small leather credential holder, the kind reserved for the highest levels of corporate leadership. She opened it slowly, revealing not just a business card, but an executive access badge with holographic security features that caught the garage's LED lighting like trapped fire. Officer Martinez, who had been trying to make sense of the situation for the past 10 minutes, leaned forward to read the credentials. His expression shifted from professional skepticism to wide-eyed recognition. "Zara Washington," he read aloud, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Meridian Financial Group." The words hit the crowd like a physical force. Several executives actually stepped backward. Dr. Park's mouth opened in shock. The three lawyers who had been supporting Catherine's discrimination began edging toward the elevator, suddenly desperate to distance themselves from the confrontation. But Catherine remained frozen, staring at the credentials as if they might spontaneously combust and save her from reality. That's not possible," she said, though her voice had lost all conviction. "Meridian's CEO is... I've never seen..." "You've never seen me?" Zara finished quietly. "Because I don't make a habit of announcing my presence in buildings I own. I prefer to observe how people behave when they think no one important is watching." The live stream viewer count had exploded past 75,000. Comments were flooding in so fast they were unreadable, but screenshots were already being shared across every major social media platform. Hashtag Meridian CEO was trending nationally, and local news stations were scrambling to send crews to the scene. Elena stepped forward, her expression mixing professional respect with barely contained satisfaction. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to properly introduce Zara Washington. She founded Meridian Financial Group 12 years ago with a $50,000 loan and built it into one of the most successful financial institutions on the East Coast. She currently oversees $4.8 billion in assets and employs over 23,000 people globally." Each fact landed like a hammer blow on Catherine's crumbling composure. The woman she had just spent 15 minutes publicly humiliating, threatening with arrest, and attempting to remove from executive parking wasn't just an executive. She was the executive. The one whose signature was on everyone's paychecks, whose decisions shaped the careers of thousands, whose company owned not just this building but dozens of others across the country. Dr. Park found his voice first. "Zara, Ms. Washington, I am so profoundly sorry. I should have intervened earlier. I should have..." "You tried to intervene, James," Zara replied, her tone gentle but firm. "Multiple times. Catherine chose not to listen." She turned her attention back to Catherine, who was now gripping the concrete pillar beside her for support. 15 years of practicing law in this building, and you never once researched who owned the company that signs your rent checks?" Catherine's mouth moved soundlessly. Around her, the other executives were having their own moments of horrified realization. If Zara owned Meridian Financial Group, and Meridian owned this building, then their own company's lease agreements, legal contracts, and business relationships all ultimately flowed through the woman Catherine had just tried to have arrested. But Zara wasn't finished. She reached into her briefcase again, this time pulling out a tablet. With a few swift taps, she projected her screen onto the garage's emergency information display, a feature designed for building evacuations that was now being used for a very different kind of emergency. Financial documents filled the large screen: acquisition papers, legal filings, stock transfers. "I called this morning's emergency board meeting," Zara explained, her voice carrying easily across the silent garage, "to announce Meridian's latest acquisition. A transaction that was finalized at 12:01 a.m. this morning." She tapped the screen again, and a familiar logo appeared: Blackwell and Associates. Catherine's knees buckled. Only Dr. Park's quick reflexes kept her from collapsing completely onto the concrete floor. "We purchased Blackwell and Associates for $340 million, Zara continued, her tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. "A premium price for a firm that's been hemorrhaging clients due to cultural issues." The implications crashed over Catherine like a tsunami. Her law firm, the company where she'd worked for 15 years, clawed her way up to senior partner, built her entire professional identity, now belonged to the woman she'd just tried to humiliate. "The acquisition was kept confidential until this morning's announcement," Elena added, stepping beside Zara in a show of solidarity that wasn't lost on anyone present. The Blackwell partners voted unanimously to accept Meridian's offer. They were particularly motivated by our promise to address the firm's diversity challenges. Officer Chen, who had been quietly observing the unfolding drama, finally spoke up. "Ma'am, given this new information, I take it there are no trespassing charges to be filed?" Zara looked at Catherine, really looked at her for the first time. The broken woman slumped against the concrete pillar, bore little resemblance to the confident executive who had been commanding security to remove an unauthorized person just minutes earlier. "No charges," Zara said quietly. "But there will be consequences." She tapped her tablet again, and a new document appeared on the screen. An employee handbook. Specifically, page 47, Zero Tolerance Policy for Discriminatory Conduct. As of 12:01 a.m. this morning, every employee of Blackwell and Associates became subject to Meridian Financial Group's employment policies, Zara explained. Policies that were developed after extensive consultation with civil rights attorneys, HR specialists, and diversity experts. She scrolled to a highlighted section. Article 12.3 states that any employee who engages in discriminatory behavior based on race, gender, religion, or any other protected characteristic faces immediate termination with cause, no warnings, no progressive discipline, no second chances. Catherine's face had gone completely white. "You can't. I have a contract. I have rights. I've been with the firm for 15 years. You had a contract with Blackwell and Associates under the old ownership structure," Zara corrected gently. "New ownership, new policies, new standards. Your contract included a standard morality clause that makes it void in cases of discriminatory conduct." She gestured toward the dozens of phones that had been recording the entire confrontation. "We have video evidence from multiple angles of you physically grabbing my property, making racially discriminatory statements, filing false police reports, and creating a hostile environment based on racial bias. Any employment attorney in the country would consider this grounds for immediate termination." The live stream chat was exploding with reactions. Legal experts who had tuned in were confirming Zara's analysis in real time. Employment lawyers were already reaching out to offer their services to other potential victims of Catherine's discrimination. But Dr. Park, who had been silent during Zara's explanation, suddenly stepped forward. "Zara, I understand the legal justification, but Catherine has been... she's made mistakes, but she's also been under tremendous pressure. The legal industry is incredibly competitive, and sometimes that brings out the worst in people." Zara studied Dr. Park's face, the genuine concern, the attempt to find mercy even in an unmerciful situation. "You're right, James. Pressure does bring out people's true character. It strips away the pretense and reveals who we really are when we think no one important is watching. She looked around the garage, making eye contact with each of the executives who had witnessed Catherine's behavior. How many of you have seen Catherine treat other people this way? Maybe not as dramatically as today, but the small comments, the microaggressions, the assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't. The silence was deafening. Several executives looked at their shoes. A few glanced at each other with expressions of uncomfortable recognition. "That's what I thought," Zara said softly. "This wasn't an aberration. This was a pattern. And patterns don't change without consequences." She turned back to Catherine, who was now openly weeping. "However," Zara continued, and something in her tone made everyone listen more carefully, "I'm not interested in destroying lives. I'm interested in changing systems." She tapped her tablet once more, and a new document appeared. Executive Transformation Program, Pilot Initiative. Meridian Financial Group is launching a rehabilitation program for executives who have engaged in discriminatory behavior. 6 months of intensive training with civil rights experts, unconscious bias specialists, and leadership coaches. Catherine looked up through her tears, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time since the credentials had been revealed. "The program is voluntary," Zara emphasized, "but completion would qualify you for reinstatement consideration in a junior role, with extensive oversight and regular evaluations." "And if I refuse?" Catherine's voice was barely audible. "Then you're terminated for cause, with no severance, no references, and a permanent flag in your employment record that will make it very difficult to find comparable work in the legal field." The choice was stark: transformation or professional death. Elena checked her watch, a subtle reminder that the board meeting was still waiting. "Catherine," Zara said, extending a manila envelope that had been in her briefcase all along, "you have until the end of business today to decide. The enrollment paperwork is in this envelope, along with information about the program curriculum and expectations." Catherine took the envelope with shaking hands, clutching it like a lifeline. "But understand this," Zara continued, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had built a financial empire. "This is the only second chance you'll get. Not just from me, but from an industry that's finally ready to hold people accountable for how they treat others." The garage fell silent, except for the hum of ventilation systems and the distant sound of city traffic 45 floors above. Zara had revealed not just her identity, but her philosophy. Power used not for revenge, but for transformation. Not to destroy those who had wronged her, but to create systems that would prevent others from being wronged in the future. It was a masterclass in leadership that would be studied in business schools for decades to come. But the most important lesson was still to come. The boardroom on the 45th floor of Meridian Financial Tower commanded a panoramic view of the city skyline, but nobody was admiring the scenery. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a mahogany conference table that could seat 40, though only 23 people had made it upstairs after the garage confrontation. Catherine sat at the far end of the table, isolated like a defendant awaiting sentencing. The manila envelope lay unopened before her, its contents representing either salvation or final judgment. Her earlier bravado had evaporated completely, leaving behind a hollow-eyed woman clutching tissues and wrestling with the destruction of everything she'd built over 15 years. Zara stood at the head of the table where she belonged, a sleek laptop open before her. The wall-mounted display showed the Meridian Financial Group logo, elegant, understated, but commanding more respect than any flashy corporate emblem ever could. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice filling the acoustically perfect room, "thank you for attending this emergency session. I know the morning has been educational for everyone involved." Nervous chuckles rippled around the table. Dr. Park sat closest to Zara, having clearly chosen his allegiance during the garage confrontation. Elena Rodriguez occupied her usual seat at Zara's right hand, her expression professionally neutral but her eyes sharp with satisfaction. 3 lawyers from Blackwell and Associates, huddled together near the windows, their faces ashen as they contemplated their complicity in Catherine's discrimination. They had supported her behavior, encouraged it even, and now faced the consequences of that choice. Before we begin the official business, Zara continued, clicking to advance her presentation, I want to address what happened in our parking garage. Not the incident itself, but what it reveals about systemic issues in our industry. The screen filled with data that made several executives shift uncomfortably in their leather chairs. Workplace discrimination costs American businesses $64 billion annually in lost productivity, legal settlements, and employee turnover. Click. Companies with diverse leadership teams show 35% higher profitability and 70% better innovation metrics. Click. Yet only 3% of Fortune 500 companies have ever had a black female CEO. Catherine's head remained bowed, but Zara noticed she was listening intently to every word. These aren't just statistics, Zara continued, her tone remaining conversational despite the weight of her message. They represent billions of dollars in wasted human potential, and that waste is costing all of you money. She clicked again, revealing a complex network diagram showing interconnected companies, Blackwell and Associates at the center, with lines extending to clients, partners, and affiliated firms. This is why today's acquisition wasn't just about expanding Meridian's legal services. It was about transforming an entire ecosystem of business relationships. The implications began dawning on the assembled executives. Several started calculating their own exposure, pulling out phones to alert their legal teams. Elena leaned forward, speaking for the first time since they'd entered the boardroom. 17 companies represented in this room use Blackwell for legal services. 29 have ongoing contracts or partnerships that flow through their network. Exactly, Zara agreed. When discrimination happens at Blackwell, it creates ripple effects throughout the entire business community. Lost opportunities, damaged relationships, legal liability that extends far beyond one law firm. She clicked to a financial breakdown that made the room go completely silent. In the past 5 years, companies in this network have paid out $127 million in discrimination settlements. Legal fees added another $43 million. Lost contracts and damaged relationships cost an estimated $200 million in unrealized revenue. The numbers hung in the air like toxic gas. Executives frantically texted their boards, their CFOs, their crisis management teams. That's $370 million in preventable losses, Zara continued relentlessly. Money that could have been invested in growth, innovation, employee development, or shareholder returns. Instead, it went to lawyers and settlements and public relations cleanup. Marcus Thompson, CEO of a mid-sized consulting firm, finally found his voice. What exactly are you proposing, Ms. Washington? Zara's smile was sharp but not unkind. I'm proposing that we fix this, systematically, permanently, together. She clicked to reveal a comprehensive plan. The Meridian Equity Protocol. Starting immediately, every company in the Blackwell network will implement standardized anti-discrimination policies with independent oversight. Not internal HR departments that report to executives who might have conflicts of interest, but external auditing firms with no stake in covering up problems. Click. Real-time monitoring systems that track hiring patterns, promotion rates, complaint resolution, and workplace culture metrics. AI-powered analysis that identifies potential discrimination before it becomes litigation. Click. Mandatory bias training for all leadership positions, with annual certification requirements. Not the usual corporate theater, but intensive, evidence-based programs with measurable outcomes and real accountability. The room was completely silent. These weren't suggestions or recommendations. They were requirements, and everyone present understood the implications. The legal framework is already in place, Zara continued. Every contract renewal, every partnership agreement, every service relationship will include compliance with these protocols. Companies that don't participate simply won't be part of the network. Dr. Sarah Chen, who ran a successful investment firm, spoke up. "And if we refuse?" Zara's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "That's absolutely your choice, Sarah. But I should mention that Meridian processes $2.3 billion in financial transactions quarterly. About $45 million of that involves your firm's operations." Dr. Chen's face went pale. "You're threatening to cut off our transaction processing?" "I'm explaining market dynamics," Zara corrected gently. "Meridian provides services to companies that share our values. If our values don't align, there are other service providers available. Though I should note that our rates are typically 15 to 20% below market, and our reliability metrics are significantly higher." Elena pulled up additional data on her tablet. "We've also identified $500 million in potential new business opportunities with companies that specifically seek partners with strong diversity and inclusion practices. The market is shifting, and we intend to lead that shift." Catherine suddenly looked up from the envelope she'd been clutching. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. "This isn't just about me, is it? You've been planning this for months." "2 years," Zara confirmed. "Ever since we lost 3 of our most brilliant female attorneys, all women of color, who left the profession because they couldn't deal with the discrimination they faced from firms like yours." She clicked to display photographs of 3 young women in graduation regalia, all smiling with the confidence of people who believed the world was full of opportunities. Dr. Maria Santos, Harvard Law Review, now teaching law school because she was tired of being asked to fetch coffee during depositions. Click. Angela Kim, who developed innovative approaches to corporate compliance that saved our clients millions, left after a partner at another firm suggested she was hired for diversity points rather than qualifications. Click. Dr. Keisha Williams, constitutional law expert who argued successfully before 3 appellate courts, quit after being mistaken for court stenographer 11 times in 6 months. The photographs hit harder than any statistic could. These weren't abstract victims. They were brilliant professionals whose talents had been wasted by exactly the kind of thinking Catherine had displayed in the parking garage. Each of these women represented millions in lost revenue, institutional knowledge, and future innovation. We lost them not because of anything Meridian did wrong, but because we failed to create an industry environment where their brilliance could flourish. She closed the photo presentation and looked directly at Catherine. "So yes, Catherine, this is about more than your behavior this morning. Your actions were simply the catalyst for changes that should have happened years ago." The 3 Blackwell lawyers who had supported Catherine's discrimination were now visibly sweating. One of them, a senior associate named Robert Hayes, finally spoke up. "Ms. Washington, what about those of us who may have made mistakes in judgment this morning? Are we all facing termination?" Zara studied their faces, fear, regret, and the dawning realization that careers could end based on moments of moral failure. "Robert, you have the same choice Catherine has. Acknowledge the problem, commit to change, and participate in our transformation program, or find employment elsewhere." She clicked to a timeline extending 6 months into the future. Phase 1 begins Monday with Blackwell's restructuring under new management. Phase 2 launches next month with implementation of monitoring systems across all partner companies. Phase 3 introduces independent auditing and certification programs. The scope was breathtaking. This wasn't just about fixing one law firm or even one incident. This was about fundamentally changing how an entire business ecosystem operated. The goal, Zara concluded, isn't to punish people like Catherine. The goal is to create systems where the next Catherine never develops those attitudes in the first place, where discrimination becomes not just morally wrong but economically impossible. Elena nodded approvingly. Market-based solutions to social problems. Economics driving ethics instead of fighting against them. It's the only approach that scales, Zara agreed. You can't legislate hearts and minds, but you can create economic incentives that make discrimination too expensive to maintain. She closed her laptop and looked around the table, making eye contact with each executive in turn. So, who's ready to build a better future? The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was contemplative. 23 brilliant minds processing implications, calculating costs and benefits, imagining possibilities that hadn't existed an hour earlier. Dr. Park was the first to speak. Park Holdings is fully committed to this initiative. Chen Investment Group will participate, Dr. Chen added, though her voice carried the weight of someone making an expensive decision. One by one, voices around the table expressed agreement. Not universal, 3 executives remained silent, clearly planning to exit the network rather than comply. But 20 companies representing billions in revenue had just agreed to fundamentally change how they operated. Catherine finally opened the manila envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were program details, legal documents, and a path toward redemption that she'd never imagined possible an hour earlier. "What about me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the room's ambient noise. All eyes turned to Zara, waiting for her response to the woman who had publicly humiliated her, tried to have her arrested, and embodied everything wrong with the industry Zara was trying to transform. Zara studied Catherine's tear-stained face across the expanse of polished mahogany. The boardroom held its collective breath as 23 executives waited to see how power would choose to express itself, through mercy or justice, transformation or destruction. "Catherine," Zara said finally, her voice softer than it had been all morning, "what do you think should happen to you?" The question caught everyone off guard. Catherine blinked rapidly, as if the concept of having agency in her own fate was incomprehensible after the morning's revelations. I deserve to be fired," Catherine whispered, her voice cracking with exhaustion. "I deserve everything that's happening to me. I became someone I don't even recognize, someone my daughter wouldn't be proud of." The mention of family humanized Catherine in a way that shifted the room's energy. She wasn't just a corporate villain anymore. She was a flawed person who had lost her way in a system that rewarded competitive cruelty over collaborative excellence. Zara walked slowly around the table, her footsteps muffled by thick carpet. She stopped beside Catherine's chair, not looming over her but positioning herself as an equal participant in a difficult conversation. 6 months ago, Meridian hired Dr. Rebecca Martinez, an organizational psychologist, to help us understand why talented people kept leaving our industry. Her research revealed something fascinating. Zara pulled out her phone and opened a research document, reading directly from the screen. People who discriminate aren't born that way. They're shaped by environments that reward zero-sum thinking while providing no framework for inclusive success. Dr. Martinez called it scarcity discrimination, hurting others because you believe opportunities are limited. Catherine looked up, confusion mixing with fragile hope in her red-rimmed eyes. "Blackwell and Associates culture rewarded you for being territorial, exclusive, and competitive at any cost. For 15 years, you succeeded by keeping other people down. The firm didn't just tolerate this behavior, it promoted you because of it." Around the table, other executives began shifting uncomfortably. Several recognized their own organization's cultures in Zara's description. But Dr. Martinez also discovered that people can change when incentive structures change, when collaboration becomes more profitable than competition, when inclusion drives innovation instead of hindering it. Zara sat down in the chair next to Catherine, a gesture that sent ripples of surprise through the boardroom. "So here's what's going to happen. You'll resign from your current position today with a severance package that includes 6 months of salary and full benefits. But you'll also become the first participant in our executive transformation program." Elena leaned forward, clearly familiar with this initiative. "The program isn't punishment, Catherine. It's education. Intensive training with Dr. Martinez and her team to understand unconscious bias, develop inclusive leadership skills, and learn to recognize discriminatory behavior before it happens." Catherine's hands trembled as she processed the offer. "You're giving me a second chance?" "I'm giving you the tools to earn a second chance," Zara corrected.
The program requires genuine self-reflection, uncomfortable realizations about your past behavior, and fundamental changes in how you think about success and leadership. She pulled out a tablet and showed Catherine a detailed curriculum. 12 weeks of one-on-one coaching with bias experts. 8 weeks of group sessions with other executives who've made similar mistakes. 4 weeks of supervised mentoring with employees from underrepresented backgrounds. The room was completely silent. This wasn't the corporate blood sport most executives had expected. It was something entirely different, restorative justice applied to professional misconduct. And when you complete the program, Zara continued, you'll have a choice. You can take your new skills to another firm, armed with certification that proves your commitment to inclusive leadership. Or, she paused, building anticipation. You can return to work for Meridian as our Director of Inclusive Culture, helping other companies implement similar transformation programs. Catherine's mouth fell open. Around the table, executives exchanged glances of amazement. The woman who had been destroying her career 90 minutes earlier was now offering her a path to redemption, and possibly a more meaningful career than she'd ever imagined. "Why?" Catherine whispered. "After everything I said. Everything I did to you." Zara's smile was genuine for the first time all morning. "Because changing you changes everything. Every executive you influence, every policy you help create, every company culture you help transform, the impact multiplies exponentially." She stood and addressed the entire room. This is what systemic change looks like. Not destroying people who make mistakes, but giving them tools to become part of the solution. Catherine's transformation story will be more powerful than any corporate diversity presentation could ever be. Dr. Park was nodding approvingly. Turn former opponents into advocates. Brilliant strategy. It's also practical, Zara added. Catherine understands this industry's competitive pressures intimately. She knows exactly how and why discriminatory behavior develops. That makes her uniquely qualified to design solutions that work in real-world environments. Elena pulled up implementation statistics on her tablet. Early pilot results show that executives who complete transformation programs demonstrate 89% improvement in inclusive leadership metrics. Their teams report 45% higher job satisfaction and 67% lower turnover rates. The business case was overwhelming. This wasn't just about doing the right thing. It was about driving measurable improvements in performance and profitability. Effective immediately, Zara announced, completion of our transformation program becomes a professional development requirement for senior leadership positions throughout our network. Not as punishment, but as certification, like earning an MBA, but for building inclusive, high-performing teams. She turned back to Catherine, who was clutching the enrollment paperwork like a lifeline. So what do you say, Catherine? Are you ready to become the leader you always had the potential to be? Catherine looked around the table, at faces that had watched her fall and were now witnessing something unprecedented. Her former peers were seeing redemption offered to someone who, by traditional standards, deserved none. Yes, she said, her voice barely audible. Then, stronger. Yes, I want to do better. I want to be better. The applause that followed was different from any corporate ovation. Quieter, more thoughtful, the sound of people recognizing they had witnessed genuine transformation begin. But Zara had one final announcement that would cement everything they had accomplished. There's one more thing, she said, returning to her laptop. The Executive Transformation Program isn't just for Catherine. Starting next quarter, we're offering it to every company in our network. The transformation was complete. What had started as one woman's public humiliation had become the foundation for industry-wide change. And Catherine Blackwell, the architect of her own downfall, was now positioned to become the face of that transformation. 6 months later, the same boardroom buzzed with different energy entirely. The Meridian Equity Summit had become the most anticipated corporate event of the year, with over 800 companies on the waiting list to join the transformation network. Zara stood at the familiar podium where she had once confronted an industry's worth of discrimination,
But now she was introducing someone who embodied the possibility of change. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Director of Inclusive Culture, Catherine Blackwell. The applause was genuine as Catherine walked confidently to the microphone, not the broken woman from that morning in the parking garage, but someone fundamentally transformed. Her bearing was humble, yet assured. Her smile authentic rather than performative.
6 months ago, I was the worst version of myself, Catherine began, her voice steady and clear. I discriminated against Zara Washington because I had been taught that success meant keeping others down. I was catastrophically, publicly, inexcusably wrong. The audience of 300 executives listened intently. Many had seen the viral footage that launched 1,000 corporate training programs and became required viewing in business schools nationwide. But Zara didn't just end my old career. She gave me the chance to build a meaningful one.
The Executive Transformation Program didn't just change how I work, it changed who I am as a human being. She clicked to a slide showing program statistics that told a remarkable story. 63 executives have completed transformation training so far. 0 recidivism rate. All 63 now hold leadership positions in inclusive organizations, influencing hiring and promotion decisions, affecting over 25,000 employees. The numbers spoke louder than testimonials ever could. This wasn't just individual rehabilitation, it was systematic culture change at massive scale. Today, I'm announcing our international expansion. Companies in 18 countries have committed to implementing these protocols, representing over $75 billion in combined revenue and 200,000 employees. From her seat in the front row, Zara watched with quiet satisfaction. The woman who had once embodied everything toxic about corporate culture had become its most effective reformer. But this isn't the end of our story, Catherine continued, looking directly into cameras live streaming to over 150,000 viewers worldwide. It's the beginning. Because real change happens when each of us decides to do better, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who comes after us. She paused, her voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. These touching stories of transformation prove that real-life stories can have powerful endings. When we listen to Black stories, when we change our own stories, we create life stories worth sharing with the world. The standing ovation lasted 4 full minutes. As the summit concluded and executives filed out to implement their own transformation programs, Zara reflected on the journey from that parking garage confrontation to this moment of industry-wide change. Her phone buzzed with a message from Harvard Business School. Meridian case study now required curriculum. Ripple effects reaching Fortune 50 companies we never contacted. Transformation is contagious. What started with one moment of discrimination had become a movement that was reshaping corporate America and spreading globally. But Zara knew the real victory wasn't in conference rooms or training programs. It was in the daily interactions between people who now saw each other as equals. It was in career paths opening for young women who looked like her. It was in children growing up in workplaces where discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was economically impossible. The story wasn't over. It was evolving, spreading, transforming everything it touched. Your story has the power to change everything. If you've experienced discrimination in your workplace, your story matters. Share it in the comments below, not just to document what happened, but to inspire the changes that need to happen. If you've witnessed transformation like Catherine's, tell us about it. If you're ready to be part of the solution in your own organization, let us know what steps you're taking. This video proves that one moment of courage can transform entire industries. What moment will you create? Share this story with leaders who need to see that systematic change is possible. Subscribe for more real-life stories of quiet power reshaping the world. Hit that notification bell because these stories of resilience and transformation happen every day. And together, we can amplify them. What would you have done in Zara's position? What will you do in yours? The future of inclusive leadership starts with your next decision. Your voice. Your choice to stand up or speak out or transform the systems around you. Make it count. Make it heard. Make it matter. Hatch systemic change. Hatch transformation. Stories. Inclusive. Leadership. Quiet power. Wins. Future of work.